Yeah, so this is Tait Fletcher here. He is, he's been on the podcast. He is responsible for 3 hours of content that I had to edit down. One of the most edited podcasts I've ever done, next to Kyle Turley, which we all, you know how exciting.
That one got edited to 0?
to 0 minutes of you.
I think you called me and said, I don't think we can put this podcast out.
It was highly edited. No, but Tate, a very, very dynamic guest. And also very dynamically talented. He's probably the only person here who has, you can YouTube his fight montages.
Or
right?
kill montages.
Kill montages.
Personal favorite is the self-kill Westworld, bro.
Thanks.
That was intense. So,
was
without further ado, guys, go ahead. We'll just let you know.
I was watching The Accountant, and I realized when Ben Affleck beat up and killed him, I texted him, I can't believe Ben Affleck killed you. He's like, yeah, it was good. He's like, yeah, I got paid good. I mean, yeah, so if you guys have seen John Wick, you've seen The Accountant, you've seen Tate get killed. I was actually sad when I got to see John Wick 2 that they didn't bring Tate back to get killed again.
I always want to come back as a twin of the guy that got killed in the last thing. I figured that would be a great kind of resurgence, but they never go for it.
Yeah, so Tate not only stuntman, actor, fighter, just deep thinker. We invited Tate down to our podcast when we were in Costa Mesa. He came in and I had met Tate up at Deuce, and he's one of the founders for Caveman Coffee, and just a super dynamic, really interesting kind of person that I really enjoy, because I always like people that have multi-dimensions and renaissance in a lot of way. And he came in and fucking blew my mind. I mean, we were sitting there for 3 hours, and all of a sudden I'm looking around, I'm like, we've been here 10 minutes? And it was just extremely genuine, and then we were talking about this earlier. There's always you guys have, we talk about our athleticism model, that there's this internal coach's eye when you see good movement. You can watch great athletes move through space and know that something about what they're doing is extremely pleasing. And the same thing with authenticity. My buddy Rick from Starling Gear made this point. He's like, when you see something authentic and you see something honest, it's attractive like beauty, like symmetry, like athleticism. And so listening to Tate talk about his journey and this hero's journey, from stick fighting in the park and this, and I mean, just doing all the million different things, and seeing it in his level of inner reflective was just authentic to me. And when they asked me, they were like, hey, if you get to sit at your cool podcast table, which I created a new base for, which I'm pretty stoked. Those of you guys on Instagram helped me pick the color. I wanted to sit down with Tate and rap a little bit and not only talk about the process of how you got here, but that idea of being authentic and always being true to yourself.
Hey, everybody. I have no idea what value I bring to this. I'm just happy to be at the party, like always. And I really get uncomfortable hearing highly talented, because that sets me up for a position which I might not be able to attenuate here. But I'll do my best. I don't know if you guys have heard the story of this table, but it's maybe a whole other podcast in itself. Pretty amazing, the background of this. And as far as authenticity, I'm not a fan of me very much. And I guess what I found out is that this is what I've got, though. And so I look in the mirror, I go, well, it's not what you'd have chosen, but this is what we got to work with, so let's go ahead and do the best we can. And I have little self-talks like that, which are kinder than previous self-talks that I've had. But one of the things that I'm highly involved in, I guess, for 25 years now is, I've been on the front lines of alcoholism and drug addiction, and extend myself wherever I can in that regard. And a guy told me one time, he goes, there's a wrench that'll fit every nut that walks in the door, right? But they're not going to recognize you if you're playing somebody else. So it's highly imperative that you play you, that you know you. And that became the thing when you reduce things down to life or death, or maybe even just happiness or not, it gets real clear. And so I had to become real reductive with my life and go, what's important? And to the base of that is, to be a member of the community in good standing. And that wasn't something I grew up with or wanted as a kid, really. But, and it wasn't there because I wanted to be a good guy either. It was a self-interested altruism at best. And it's yielded great results for me in that in that regard, and the greatest result being that I can stand to live with me. And that thing about authenticity, what I found, I guess, with it is that, when you look at the schism, a friend of mine, he told me, he says, you know what a coach is, Tate? And I said, yeah, of course. He says, do you know the etymology of coach? And I said, no, which puzzled me because I was in my delusion thinking that I knew a few things. And he says it's stagecoach. And it takes a guy from here and gets him to where he wants to go. Doesn't take him from where he thinks he is, And so when I look at it like that, it's like I need an honest representation of where I am in myself, in my soul, in my physicality, and whatever that is, in order to go anywhere. And as they say, if you don't know where you're going, any wind will take you there. And so when I started to go, maybe it's possible to become directive with my life in order to maybe manifest results if I do good work. Maybe that was part of the key. And then I found out that if I was going in a results-oriented way, that wasn't real helpful to me, and it left a lot of heartache. But if I just got into good, solid work, and I tended that, and I was true to it, that I'd get good results. And that's what I've been. And so as a coach, I worn a lot of hats as an athlete, as a coach, as a criminal. There's been a colorful history for me. But the thing that I think that it all distills down to is service. Is like this, is like, if I'm doing something for the self-serving of Tate, I got a wrong head about it, and when I can go, why be better, what's the point of me raising my consciousness or raising my abilities or raising my skill set to be able to transmit something to somebody else is of no avail to me at all unless I'm completely invested in the idea that I cannot win and you can't win. If you're not getting well, it's tough for me to, what's the point? And so through this storytelling, I think, is where we can heal each other a little bit. And the first time I saw that really was in coaching. And so athleticism and competition to me had become a real fortifying point of my journey in that way. And all those simple things, that foundation, as I've kind of built a life outside of that, I'd get lost in the scaffolding that I built, right? And then I get up there and then it gets tilty. I'm like, I can't balance this very well. And then it always goes back to what the right thing is taking care of my foundation. And that foundation is rooted in service, so I just say yes a lot. And then I try to go, okay, if it doesn't meet my standards of function and performance, then I'm not fucking with it. I'm not gonna do it. I don't have any interest in something that's gonna walk me in a circle or you in a circle. And so I don't have a whole lot of friends because I'm really honest. And if you're walking in a circle, I'll tell you look funny, And if you're gonna convince me that walking in a circle is the best way, we're gonna have an argument about that. And so when I do that, that's nice too, because there's a lot of voices I don't wanna hear. And when I get with like-minded people that also are looking for function and performance, whether it's in their relationships, their skill set as an athlete, their lovers, their kids, their jobs, whatever it is, I feel like that's a position I can work from. And if we're worried about walking in, our circles, I tell guys all the time still, if what you're at, it's like coaching, a lot of people talk about coaching and they talk about success. And I bet there's different answers in the room for that. What is that? But to me, coaching was never a way to get money, right? But there's a lot of money that's attached to this idea of coaching. And for me, it's like a calling. It's like how do you give back and make somebody else grow up around you? You don't need money out of that, man. That's a different thing. And I don't want to. I never wanted. So I own a gym, and I never wanted to muddy that water a little bit. So I was a horrible businessman, but my gym's available to everybody that wants to go, and it's still in 10 years in the running now, and I've been able to transfer that. But that becomes the ethos, because I see that when I would go, fuck, I need to get money though, I gotta do X, Y, and Z. I had a lot of reasons for that. Everything got dark. I didn't like coaching anymore. My students didn't like getting coached from me very much because everything got askew. And so I've got to always, I'm not, I don't learn a lesson and then I'm like, now we're just operating at a high level. I got to learn the lesson again and again. So I guess the greatest attribute to that foundation of authenticity is having people around me that'll say, man, you're acting funny. And so I put a lot of stock in my picket fence that I have around me, and I think that that's the biggest thing is like, you know, this is a lot about teams and coaching and this and that, but like, you know, everybody kind of becomes everybody else's coach if everybody's kind of like-minded with their ethos in the room, you know?
What are you, sounds like you're using the word mentorship and coaching in kind of like an interchangeable way.
Yeah.
So how do you find, you know, I mean, obviously you know, have done, you know, like a million different things, right? From, you know, and as I was going through it today, I mean, how do you find people that are equals and counterpoints? Like if, you know, like in jiu-jitsu or fighting or acting, like how do you go out and find people that influence you in such a way that's a positive way? And, you know, you made a good point, like, you know, I don't have a lot of friends because
right.
if you want to have a lot of friends, or if you don't want to have friends, don't be honest. If you want to have a lot of friends, lie to everybody. You know, that's why I always think that people have like 1 million Instagram followers. I'm like, oh, there's probably a lot of bullshit in there.
And they're alone in every picture.
Yeah, they're alone, and it's just all them.
sad.
Like, hey, look at me and all my friends. It's only you all the time.
Right.
And you know, and I think that's a really interesting thing in that, you know, people they need coaching, they need mentors, they need fathers, they need people around them that will actually give them honest feedback. You know, and those of you guys are familiar with the Emperor's New Clothes. Remember, you know, Emperor comes out naked and everybody says, oh, it looks great, except for the one guy which he throws in the jail. But that idea of, you know, can you find people that will be honest and people that are, you know, in a situation to want to make you a better person, not just be your friend because they might think that they get to meet Ben Affleck or
right.
hang out with Joe Rogan and Sue. I mean, I don't know if you guys have seen Tate on Joe Rogan's podcast, but you know,
it's all a magic trick.
For what you do in Hollywood, I mean, there's all the people like, oh, you know, this is my boy and this,
right.
and they're just, I mean, I saw that in the NFL. I think it was hilarious. Like my phone rang off the hook and this, and the day I retired, my phone did not ring. And you know what? I was like, thank God. I thought I was gonna have to change my number just so I get rid of people.
It's an interesting thing when the lights go off and you're like, God, it's cold in the shade. And then you just have this readjustment period. It's like we heard with Adam, I mean, it's like those kinds of stories are like turning the page and going, who am I now? Who am I as I sit here today? It's a hard conversation to stay in because it you know, it brings up doubts and questions and you know, we want to feel fortified and I guess what I look for in people is like I used to be pretty good at jiu-jitsu, and the partners I would look for wouldn't be guys that were equal to me necessarily. I didn't care if you were better or worse or whatever, but I wanted the hard worker, the guy that would be there and put reps in later, the guy that was in love with, the guy that started to dream about it. That's my guy, you know, because it's not, the skills will come with my reps, no matter what it is. But to have a guy that you're both kind of chasing each other and that energy that you can bring to it, you know, that's what becomes the fruit of life for me. It's not walking the road. You know, I always thought as a little kid, like, it sucked to win the lotto. Because then you're rich all by yourself, and all your friends, what do you do? You know, it's like, I never thought that would be a great deal. It seemed like that's a lonely ass way, and I didn't think that you could, you know, hug money.
I just talked, I've told Spanton this, one of my favorite movies is Trading Places with Eddie Murphy
right.
and Dan Aykroyd. That end when he's sitting on the beach and he's like, looking good, Billy Ray. You know, and he looks out and his buddy's on the yacht. And it only makes sense that he was on the beach because his buddy was on the yacht, that they both were there. And I'm like, if you're on the beach by yourself and you're like,
you did
well,
it
this great beat. No. And so like
yeah.
that piece of, you know, and like I knew this from the NFL, like the reason that, you know, in the off season we travel to other NFL players is because you guys both have time off and some available cash to be able to do things with. So you kind of get into that and then you realize that that's not really real life.
Right.
And, but yeah, I agree with you. It's, you know, like years ago I used to hang out with these billionaire dudes. And their dad was a billionaire and they were billionaires and he funded them. And, you know, it's really easy to make $1 billion if somebody seeds you $2 billion. And what was interesting, and these guys they owned real estate, I mean, just everything, private jets, the whole deal. And it had dawned on me one day that they had no appreciation. It was actually at a restaurant. They had no appreciation for food because they'd never had a bad meal. Right, they'd never cooked their own meals. Everybody had always prepared. Like they didn't, you know. And I was telling them the story about eating Costco chicken. and white rice when we were in college because my scholarship check was $740, my rent was $475, and I had roughly a couple $100 from my parents, so I had about $500 a month to live on, and majority of that went to food. So we go to Costco and get these huge bags of like Costco frozen chicken. It's probably why I hate chicken to this day. And white rice and black beans, and we would cook them on the foreman, this, and that was the majority of our diet. And I realized these dudes never ate Costco chicken. Didn't even know what Costco was. And I'm thinking like, man, like one, these dudes don't deserve to hang out with me. And I did, and I didn't hang out with them anymore. Because you know why? Because I wanted to see the strain, I want the struggle. That's why I always give Woodsky a bad time. The first time he ever went to lift weights, he was like 14 years old and squatted 410. So he's never squatted less than 400 pounds in his life.
That's amazing.
I'm like, God damn you. You're like those dudes that never ate Costco chicken. He's never been weak. Oh, sorry, 420.
Damn.
One of my favorite people. And, but that piece of like, the struggle and the strain, I think what was so, struck me and, it's not rare that I run into people where I like, am just so fascinated by the progression and the travel and this. And I mean, we were on the podcast with Tate, and like you guys hear, I mean, not only a guy that's done a ton of things, but it's been so perspective, like looking in. And we were talking about this earlier, man. So many people are afraid to turn that mirror on themselves and look in and think like, am I a good person? Like he talks about service. The other analogy that we were talking about earlier was one of my other favorite movies, Saving Private Ryan. Matt Damon goes from being a young dude to an old guy, and he's standing there, and Tom Hanks told him to earn it, and he looks at his wife and is like, "Tell me I was a good man. Tell me I earned it." She's like, "What are you talking about? Like, here's this kid, had this, gift of life given him to him by this guy, and there he is all these years later, and he needed somebody else's validation." And, he was a good dude. I mean, the fact that he had his kids there and his wife and grandkids, he had obviously lived the life he should. He wasn't there by himself. And like we talked about, trading places, being on the island all by yourself, nobody wants that. And so to be able to go through life and find friends and mentors and people and have a clan of individuals around you that are like-minded. Logan, from Deuce came and talked he talked about that wolf pack, which was like the lowest level of business, that there was this highly evolved. And as I looked at the guys, I'm like, we'll always be a wolf pack.
They got the coolest t-shirts.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, Wolfpack always has good t-shirts. And you know what? Everybody in the Wolfpack can kill. And everybody can kill, they can all bring stuff home, nobody's a specialist, everybody runs and everybody hunts. And so being able to put yourself and surround yourself with like-minded people that push you, because here's the deal, man, like if you walk into the gym and you're the strongest dude, or you walk in, you're always the best, then there's very little need to improve, but feeling like you're drowning. I said, you guys obviously know I went to Berkeley, rhetoric major. We've been doing this for a long time. I'm very comfortable speaking in front of people. One of the only times I've ever felt like I was getting my ass kicked was when Mr. 420 back there, all of a sudden, at our last year's symposium, Woodsky went off and had a really just interesting moment that I think was the moment of our symposium last year. And it was a really cool thing to sit there and hear that other people have this rich experience. And they've come to the same conclusions in different ways and comes from different places. And like, even though we come from different places, that idea of like, sharpen the blade, improve yourself, that there's a process to everything. Like you just don't go in and strength is accumulated, but also so is skill, so is manhood. And, some people have incredible role models when they're young. Other people don't, and they have to find it after trials and tribulations.
Now, like where you are now, which is advanced in your skill sets, find coaching still, and not, because there is that portion where the coach then rests on what he knows, and so how do you keep your progression and drive going?
I think you got to always search for things that scare you a little bit. Mm-hmm. If I'm not scared a little bit, if I'm not constantly searching for something that like that ring is a little too far out, like that's a bit, that's too, I mean, it's like you're cutting a steak or like a piece of meat and like, is this bite gonna choke me?
Right.
Can I choke on this bite? Like, should I cut this in half? No, fuck it, I'm gonna throw it in my mouth and like see if I can swallow it up with a bite, right? But like that idea of like, am I pushing myself out? If I go in and I lift weights and the weights are never heavy enough for me to think like, what if I don't get this? Like, is this one gonna fucking crash me? Is this gonna snap me? Oh yeah, I got this, no problem. And I think people get to the point of success and then they stop pushing themselves out the comfort zone. I'm already strong. Well, what is strong? Right? What is successful? Yeah, what does it matter? So I think, and this is awful, but horsepower, right? So 500 horsepower doesn't feel like a lot to me to drive. And the reason being is I've driven 1,000 horsepower.
Yeah.
I did 200 miles an hour on a twin turbo Hayabusa motorcycle on 95 in Daytona without a helmet, right? So that's stupid, but that air shifter was so fast. And I watched the Boost, I like Boost. But like those ideas of am I doing things to push myself outside the comfort zone? You don't have to ride a bike 200 miles an hour to do that. But whether it be in jiu-jitsu, in life, or in business, in acting, or just within your person, are you continuing to do things that, you know, I don't know if I'll be able to be successful. Is this the one? Is this the one that's going to expose me for the fraud that I am? Do I not have the skill set? Is my blade not sharp enough? Do I not have the right staff? Do these people not what's going? All of these kind of self-doubts have to push you to improve. And like, hey, the NFL was probably the world's greatest proving ground. We were talking a little bit about, I heard Aubrey Marcus talk, and he was talking about like this darkness and going through this whole thing. And I was like, you want to know what darkness and what doubt and fear looks like? Try running out in front of 100,000 people with your name on the back of your jersey and then basically one-on-one fighting a dude in front of millions of people. And then if you mess up, they put a camera on you because there's cameras circling all over. I was like, dude, that's strain, that's stress. That's what wakes you up in the morning, kicks you in the pants to send you to the gym to make sure that you're on point so that you don't look like an asshole because there's no hiding. And I think the problem is that in a society we've got really good about blending in and hiding, that no longer do people look and say, did you do it right? Are you a good person? Are you the Matt Damon sitting next to his wife being like, tell me I'm a good man. Tell me I earned this. And they're, oh yeah, you did great. You did great. No, fucking earn that shit. And I think I don't want anywhere to hide. All right, I'm sitting up here in front of a table. I mean, I built this, the base. I hope it doesn't fall down. But I know it's not. You know why? I use grade 8 hardware. I welded this thing up myself. I mean, I ran hot passes. It's part of the deal. And I think people are constantly looking, and I don't want people to hide. I want people to put themselves out there, but I want it done in an authentic way. I don't want to hear some fucking bullshit ayahuasca trip to help find myself. I know who I am. I just, the process, the strain, the struggle, the training, the life, the commitment, the growth, the education, the constant state of learning is what just clears away the rubble and helps me see more clearly.
I think what we get caught in, and I've been caught in it, and when athletes come into the gym, you can see it clearly, and you can see when they break through it. There's people that come in the gym and they can't wait to dig in. And then when they see this is hard in front of them, they go, like if somebody's trying to do a snatch for the first time or something, and you can see people click that they're going to dig into that they want that difficulty. But so often I cleave to warmth and comfort, and like, especially if you grow up and don't have a lot of that stuff, you're like, it's nice to eat hot food and have the heat be on in the morning when I get up and all that, and drive a nice car, whatever it is, but to the degree that I acquire comforts, I start to die. They erode me, and so I see it everywhere. We're really compromised by our own comforts in a way, and so I like that. Do something scary every day. Get into a project that's scary for a long time that you're never really comfortable with, like maybe public speaking, or like I tried to do stand-up comedy, which is an awful thing. You just burn under the lights, sucking. Maybe 1 million times before you can get it together. Am I loud enough?
Check.
So those things for me, I start to look at like where can I?
Were you a good stand-up comic?
No, horrible.
Why?
I only went up there just because it was terrifying for me.
Do you think you're not a funny person?
No, but that's easy to do off the cuff. Hard to do when it's contrived. It's all contrived, right? And so you've built an act that you're supposed to punch and has all these little nuances of speech. It's a dance to follow. And no, I suck. I'm horrible at that. I can make a joke off of what you say, but that's it. So, but my point is that like, without looking into those things, I start to go, I'm doing pretty good, and I get pretty satisfied with myself, and that gets really gross inside like 3 days. It's and so I try to stay really You know that there's an old punk axiom, satisfaction's the death of desire. And I've never really been satisfied with anything I've done or who I've become, except in, you know, a guy says, well, you got a lot of success now. I was getting interviewed a couple years ago, and I go, I don't know what that means, man. I don't have any idea what you think success is, or why would you think I have it? And then I started thinking about that question and like, what do I think that is? What would that
like
be?
what would
Because is it having money? If I gave you $1 million, are you successful? No.
Well,
it doesn't mean anything.
Well, don't you think every person should figure out whether they sit down with a piece of paper or sit with somebody like Kara Miller or somebody that and like, what is my marker for success? Like, how do I know that I was successful in my endeavors? I think money's just a way to keep it score.
Sure.
Like, it's not a win or a loss. It's just a keeping of score. Like like you watch an NFL game and it's 49-51. And like somebody scored a whole lot of points, and everybody's like, oh, it was a high-scoring game. All I think of is the defense was awful of both teams, right? Somebody had to win, but like those defensive guys are all getting fired, right? So like even though the game was high-scoring, it was great, and everybody loved watching it, like those defense, like that coordinator's getting fired.
I think that's the most important thing is to look at like where, even if you win that game, if you're the guy with the highest score, you got to look at what your deficits are.
How do you sit down and formulate, and this is probably a really interesting piece, and we could probably talk forever about it, which is going to be awesome. Let's do it. But how do you sit down and figure out your marker for success? Because your version of success is different than my version of success, which is different than all your versions of success.
Right.
So is there here's
and it's evolving.
Well,
just because it's this today doesn't mean it doesn't change.
Yeah,
tomorrow.
and the problem is that we've gone in the last X amount of years through social media into like being a voyeur in a lot of ways and looking at like, hey, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook. So we're not really like get to know people, but we kind of get this kind of snapshot of what they want to show us. And very few people show honesty. Everybody wants to, hey, like I'm going to take 100 selfies and pick the one that makes me look the best. I'm going to show up and like, here's me on the beach and here, all these other things. And everybody wants to paint this picture of the life that they really, they're more interested in like the perception of what other people have of them than what they want to show themselves.
Yeah, if you like me, I'll be okay.
Yeah, because you know what? Because that's how I value my self-worth.
Right.
If you think I'm kicking ass, then I must be. But like, that's a terrible measure of success.
Right.
So then how do you sit down and say, all right, this is what's important to me. This is how I'm going to gauge my success. And, you brought it up earlier when you talked about service.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, if I can grow something that allows the people around me to flourish, and, one of the coolest things for the guys this year is like, both Luke and Tex bought houses, right?
Sick.
And I was so stoked that like they not only that they had got into a 30-year commitment for a mortgage. As my dad told me, I was 23 years old when I bought my first house. He's like, you're going to pay us home off when you're 53 years old. How awesome is that? I'm like, not awesome. And he's like, that's a big commitment we went through. And like, I'm like, you guys are in the fight. But like that piece of like, this is mine, this is his dirt, this is my domicile, this is where I live. And I think like, not that you have to do that, but like, whether it be getting married, having kids, but that's not right for everybody.
Right.
And you go back to like the Tyler Durden Fight Club, like, Dad, what should I do next? Get married, have a family.
Right.
And it's like,
I have a different outlook than that. I know a lot of my friends, they'd get houses because they want to be adults, right? Like now I'm a grown up, I got a mortgage. And I don't know that that's true anymore. I mean, it doesn't work like that. It doesn't buy a house and now you're an adult. But I guess the way I view success is I look at my heroes and I go, would Darren do it that way? Is that the way he would behave? It's like it would be more comfortable for me to do it this way. It'd be more money for me to do it this way in the short term, in the small view that I can see it right now. In the big picture, it never plays out. You play yourself if you go short of your values. I mean, that's 100% of the time you play yourself. If I transgress my own values, my own standards, I've set up a cycle of despair that I cannot avoid. And so I guess when I reflected on that question, I look back and I go, all those guys that helped me when I was nothing, that picked me up, that gave me rides, that fed me, that listened to all my bullshit while I sorted it all out, I just didn't want those guys to think that they wasted their time. I wanted to know that I'd held the torch strong. You know what I mean? And that became and it still is. That's my view of my own success. And it doesn't matter about claps. about like what you've done or adoration or hatred or whatever. I mean, you know, I used to fight in a cage in your underwear basically in front of people that you love, that hate you, that are waiting for you to fall, that need you to win, all that stuff. And you might get dominated in the most brutal way by some other guy in front of everybody on live television. And that's a thing to hold on to. And then it's another thing to go, who am I walking in the cage? Because that's a different guy every time. And so how do I hold my own consciousness? And that became another thing that became super, super vital for me, is because I don't want to show up as a different person depending upon the stressor. I want to be able to be confident that I can meet that with all my applicable skills, you know? And so I think that when I drive towards that, you know, success because I want adoration or something like that, it's a wrong marker. And I just know now what wrong markers are, because none of that stuff, none of it means anything. What means something is that if I've done good work today that will carry me in tomorrow to be more useful and purposeful to my community. And I guess that goes back to the original idea of coaching to me, is not, you know, in martial arts, we'd see a lot of guys, there's a lot of fake ass rappers out there in martial arts. I don't know if you guys know that or not, but there's a lot of dudes that just want to tie a belt on and be like, you know, bow to your sensei type shit, right? And I always thought that was a little silly. And also most of those guys, a real strong sophomore high school wrestler will easily dismantle those people. And so when I look at that in coaching, it's like, the thing isn't to stand in front of the room, right? It's to make the room great. You know, that's the job of the coach. How do I make the whole room great? And that takes momentum, right? It means I can't really spend too much time with the straggler at the end. I've got to take the aggregate of the room, raise them all up, and then I got to watch what part of the herd is falling back, and then I take time with them later. And that becomes the thing of like me being conscious of how to serve outside of me, who's getting lost, who's ahead of the game, what everybody needs to flourish. And that becomes the job. And then I kind of take that into life, you know, and my prayers for myself are not to be small. Like, I want to be as great and as useful and as powerful as I can be, because that's the only way that I can be helpful, or that can be an attractive message to anybody else. And if I'm not looking to usurp my old consciousness and grow into a new self and be open to new ideas, I'm doing a disservice to, you know, whatever creator it is gave me this body or this mind or anything. I'm just like another flaccid part of the community. And that's repugnant to me. And so my own self-hatred is what drives me forward, I guess.
I mean, for most people that are, you know, have self-hatred, it becomes very destructive. You know, this idea, I mean, you get into, you know, the drugs and the alcohol thing, there's this kind of self-loathing and this self-hate, and so I'm going to punish myself, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to be the piece of shit that everybody thinks I am.
Sure.
And so I wonder how you can kind of redirect it into, you know, say, hey, like, is it a, like, not, I mean, you don't hate yourself, but you know, like, there's a fear of, like, becoming the person that a person like you would not like. Right. You know, so it's this weird kind of, like, switching of the idea.
He lives in here.
Yeah, and you know what? And you don't like that person, and there's a way, and you know the process to be able to make sure that the best version of yourself is the one that shines through every single day. And I didn't know you, and I've only known you in this light as a extremely kind of reflective, introspective, just interesting person. I remember we were on Wadcast podcast. Yeah. And it was one of the first times we met, and like Tate just like sat down, and it was awesome. And I remember being like, man, I would love to hang out with this dude a lot more. And it's just hilarious. Yeah, I mean, but like and every interaction we've had has been extremely positive, and always gets to the point where I think you search, like, and at least I do, man. I look for authentic things. I want people that'll give me the hard answer and maybe the tough pill to swallow. Even, and you know, like, there's things that you don't want to hear. Every single person in this room and just in life, there's like that one little thing that you're like, if somebody would say to you, you'd be like, and actually my older brother's really good about finding it. He like fucking knows.
That's a valuable dude to have around.
He is, man. My brother Ed is, he's a very, very successful high-priced defense attorney in Orange County, and he's in a really big murder trial right now. He's on like a Dateline, and the whole deal's happening right now, and he's the guy's defense attorney. But he is, I mean, his perception, and he's beyond smart, and just really able to read people, and just very articulate. And you know, and growing up like with my brother being like that, it kind of created this idea that I had to almost create this impenetrable force around me so that regardless of where I was, that nobody could crack into this, like nobody could get inside my head. And then you go out and, you know, you obviously do the job playing in the NFL and going to college, and you're in that kind of situation. So I always thought, like, how do you put yourself, I mean, because here's the deal, you're a bad motherfucker, but you're also an extremely vulnerable dude, which is really, I think, hard.
All the bad motherfuckers are.
But yeah, but I mean that's the hard thing, right? Because you think about it, like how can you be a vulnerable bad motherfucker? How can you be like?
Because we have got a problem with language. Language maybe doesn't mean what we think it means. We think of vulnerability as weakness, unless it's knowing yourself so much that you're going, I've got these deficits that I've got to work on. Who's better off? The guy that is in his ego that's thinking, I got nothing to work on, I'm a cock-strong motherfucker and I'm here to get it. Or the guy that is maybe going, hey man, maybe I could shine this up and all this stuff would be better over here. It's kind of like, you know, if I only work on my deadlift appreciates small. But if I work on other things around that, maybe everything can grow exponentially. I think that if I'm only looking for adoration, likes, claps, whatever the thing is, I don't ever get better. I get stuck. It's like if we're doing jiu-jitsu, right? And I kill you with the same triangle every single time. And you never learn because I never tell you because I need to win. I need to be better because you're a big, strong son of a bitch and I don't want you on top of me like that. But I don't get better either. You don't get better and I don't get better.
Don't you think a lot
so
of
if
people...
I show you everything, I have to find a new route.
Yeah, but don't you think a lot of people, and we were talking about this earlier, I think a lot of people, and this is just for me, I love seeing the success of my friends and the people around me.
Yeah.
Like if I turn on a movie and Tate's in it, I'll text him and be like, dude, I just saw you get killed again. It's fucking awesome. Like, thanks, bro. But like I always have reveled in my friends' successes, and when I see people like that are close to me or people around me, like crush it and do great things, like you know, Bert Soren's here, and like to see the things that Sorenex is doing, and you know, been a great partner for us, and I'm just always so impressed by not only what they do through the fabrication and the mechanics and just the branding and the image. You know, we were out at Epic Bar, went out to their big ranch, Rome Ranch, and to stand out there and see that these guys have 1,000 acres and are, you know, Buffalo Rome. I mean, it like makes your heart pitter patter because you're like, man, I would love this. And I'm just stoked that like there's people out there doing this and I get to associate with them. And I think like a lot of times people are jealous. Like, why them? Why not me? Fuck them. Fuck those people. And I think like that's like the exact wrong mindset. And I used to see that in the NFL. Guys were so like pissed off that this guy was playing well. And I just remember thinking like, if this guy plays well, then it forces me to have to up my game more than I shouldn't be here and I should go do something else. Mm-hmm. They'd always think, oh, these young guys are coming in. And I always remember telling them, hey, if the young guy can take my job and he fucking earns it and he's better than me, then I should go do something else. But there is no way a rookie's ever going to come in and do this job. Why? Because it's just, it doesn't work like that. And it's very rare that a young guy would ever show up and they'd be like, oh, this guy's great. I'd be like, all right, no problem.
We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. And you know why? It's because there's a lot of nuance, there's a lot of just information to be able to take in, and there's stress. And a lot of people have a very difficult time dealing with stress. For me, the more stressful things get, actually the more calm I get. It's just a weird thing. Like the faster I drive, the slower things move. I played, 100 career, 110 games, whatever it was, and never once heard the crowd roar. They'd be like, oh, how was the noise? It was really loud at Indy. And I was like, I could have heard a pin drop. I never heard anything. It was always deathly silent to me. And they're like, how is it? I'm like, I don't know. It just, the more stressful it gets, the quieter it gets, the things slow down. And I used to be able to see things happen slower, and it just is a weird thing. But the ability to be around people that are constantly pushing you and doing great things, and then feel excited that they're doing great things because you know what, that's going to push me to do great things, opposed from, screw Epic, like they have this 100,000, and I just, like that never made sense to me.
Right.
And I don't want to be around people like that. And when I hear that negativity or that backbiting or that shit, and it happens with strength conditioning and social media and all the other stuff, I just am, like everybody's so quick to fucking tear everybody down and this and this, and to me it just feels like wasted space. It feels like wasted time. And like you guys have heard, like my dad passed away at 80 years old recently, and I just remember him being like, I thought I'd have more time. He lived 80 years and kicked ass, had this great life, and he's sitting there being like, I thought I'd have more time. There were other things I still wanted to do. And the hilarious part is we were going through his bucket list, and he'd done everything on his bucket list. He just wanted to go redo them. I wanted to go to the Galapagos. I'm like, you went to the Galapagos, right? You saw where Charles Darwin. He's like, I wanted to go back.
That's so cool.
And it was pretty funny. I remember my brother Eddie was like, we were going through. He's like, Dad has done everything on his bucket list. He just wants to go redo them. And I thought that was cool. I mean, the idea of being able to accomplish this, but like, how do you change that mindset to like, from, I want to be successful. I want to be around people that push me, opposed from always wanting to be the big fish in the little pond, so that I always feel the best, so that I can protect my ego. Is that vulnerability?
I don't know if you're just built that way at the beginning, but it's like I always had a hunger for more. I was like, whenever I'd get to whatever level it was I was trying to achieve, I was like, well, if I can get here, this ain't shit. So we got to go higher. And it's always been a thing of that. It's like, I reset my new norm. Now my average looked like what excellent was a while ago. And I like that idea about, infinite possibility. Because otherwise I'm living in this scarcity, like you're gonna take my job or whatever the thing is, And I don't know, in the last few years I've been a lot more comfortable in this idea about I'm willing to stand in the conversation. People that are willing to have hard conversations are the people that I see that are the most successful. So I'll stand in the conversation, and as long as we've got kindness and graciousness and we're looking towards function and performance, rad, let's do that. And then, I just feel that if I'm not willing to do that, I'm shrinking from maybe my truest self. And if I'm looking to uncover more of myself so I can be more useful, so I can be a better vessel with which to carry this life, I want to do that. I'm interested in that, And I'm not interested in thinking about, like, in the rearview mirror about, oh, this guy might get that thing, or this guy, now we're at the club. I'm glad I'm not seizure prone.
I was like, oh my God. That acid I did at Woodstock,
Please stand by for technical difficulties. This is what life looks like through Rudy Reyes' eyes.
Perfect.
Actually, that's what I was going to say. That's what Rudy Reyes walks into everywhere he goes. It's like, that's you guys remember in what was it? I'm gonna get you, sucker. Every good superhero has to have his own theme music, and the dude was going in the back playing. That's Rudy.
I would like the Law and Order.
So when you here's the thing. When it's all said and done, how do you want to be remembered? Like, what's the message? What's the singular thing? Like, you talk about service, coaching, mentorship, the process, all this. Like, if you could say, hey, you know what, like, here's my one stamp. This is how I want to be remembered.
Maybe it's just somebody that tried, I mean, I don't have an end game. I start things because they're fun, right? I started looking for, like, what I'm supposed to do for a long time, and for different reasons, I wasn't able to carry what a lot of other people thought how to do, and my life has its own course, of course, but then I go, at the end of it is, maybe it'd be nice to be happy through life, if that were an option, because for a long time in life, it didn't look like there was hope. It didn't look like there's a lot of options. I never saw somebody, like to see Mark Sisson take his company and go to sale. Holy fuck, man, like Rob Wolf and Mark Sisson are two of the guys that are the reason that I'm here today, and whether they know that or not, it's like those kinds of conversations changed my life, that I was, for whatever reason, available to hear. And so, I don't look to make a mark like that. I feel like I look to, a few years ago, pardon me, I started looking to thank everybody in my life. A dude told me a while ago, a half a dozen years ago or something, he says, the only people you need to get even with, Tate, are the people that helped you. And I would look in the rearview mirror at all these mothers that just needed to get a reckoning, God damn it, or whatever. And that mindset is such a broken way to go through life, and there's no happiness there. And there's this lawyer I saw, and he looked at me, and I don't know what I'd done at that point. I'd had a professional career, and I'd been in a couple movies, and he looks at me, I was at my friend's wedding, and he goes, and he's shaking his head looking at me, this old man, and he goes, I go, what? And he says, I just never thought it would turn out like this. How'd this happen? Because he'd seen me looking at a 25-year stretch in a federal prison the last time he saw me. And my life was different, And it was like guys like that had helped me when I didn't deserve help nor desire it very much. I wanted to thank them. I wanted them to know that they mattered. And so, my course isn't so much how I'm remembered, I guess, is that I'd like to honor the nature of every single person that ever helped me, man, and I'd like to be able to be that for somebody else. And the guy told me that one time. He says, you know, you got a lot of catching up to do, Tate. And I said, well, I recognize that I owe you. You know, he'd been real kind to me and helped me a lot. And he says, you don't owe me, you owe everybody. And he says, maybe if you get as well as you can get, and that's always your course, and you help the guy coming behind you, maybe you can stay healthy. And that was of paramount interest to me at that time. And that's one of the codes that I just stay with, is like, I want to be as useful and as able as I can be, because there's somebody that I haven't met yet that needs me. And that's not, I don't say that with any grandiosity. There's somebody that hasn't met you yet that needs you. There's people that are looking at you. You know, when they say the streets are watching, that shit's real, man. And there's little kids everywhere. There's people everywhere that you don't know, but you're a stand for. Even if it's just you're sitting in the same room every week at this thing or whatever the thing is, man. And in that way, it takes away my illusions of separation between people. And so what do I want to be remembered as? Is like a citizen of the world in good standing. Somebody that's able-bodied. I can defend people. I can talk through things. I can console people. I want to be that.
So a citizen in the sense of like the Greeks,
yeah,
where it was you were a fighter, you were a warrior, you were an orator, you could philosophy here, you were this complete person. That citizens were people that had been in service of this of the republic.
It would be insulting to the gods to be otherwise.
Dude, that's good for me. I always like to end on a high note. Any questions? Yeah.
Mainly for you, Tate. So I work with a lot of kids, and for better or worse, like I like working with the kids who don't have shit, right? They can't pay me, or
Yeah.
they're fuck ups, whatever. Most people don't, though, right? Like nobody likes to fuck up the guy who makes mistakes, the criminal, until you're where you are, right? And then people want to pay you to come talk to them, right? So in that, whatever that process was for you, like, was there a person who said something, did something? Is there something you wish, looking back, you wish like there was a person who would have like stepped in and been like, hey man, fucking let's do this? Or, because I see it all the time, and most of the people that I work with, they'd much rather just like not even fuck with them, not even work with them, right? Just get them out of here, right? And I know in like a lot of high school, I work with a lot of high school kids, in their sports, if you do something wrong, you're gone, right? They cut you, you're suspended, you're not coming back, right? And so, like, was anything said to you, done? Do you wish there was anything said or done?
I always wish that there was a phrase that pays, that was like, if you get this phrase, smooth sailing, And what guys told me is, they said, we don't really care how you feel. It doesn't matter. It's what you do. You've gone through your life, Tate, with good intentions, yet you've stepped on a lot of people's toes. Tell me about your good intentions. Did it not make people's feet dirty? So own your actions. And what they gave me wasn't a phrase. They gave me a process. And I went to go see this cat, Ram Dass, that is a old spiritualist dude that was, I guess, originally Jewish, and then he became Hindu or something. I'm not exactly sure. I'm going to say it wrong and probably be offensive to people. But regardless, the guy's got a lot of wisdom, and he had this great phrase that he goes, we're all just walking each other home. I thought, man, that's a beautiful way to look at it, regardless of where you are. And do I wish there was a guy when I used to fantasize about him when I'd be cutting lawns or filling up boats with gas at the boatyard and shit. I would fantasize somebody's going to pull up and just show me how life made sense and be nice to me, and it was going to be safe. It'd be like being with my grandpa or something. And that never happened. And then I got strong. I felt like I was too weak for the world for a long time, And then I go, no, man, be that guy. Maybe your job is to have enough empathy to know what it's like to be those kids, and now be that guy. Stand in that light for them. And then I used to run into burning buildings a lot and try to pull people out and be like, I've gone into dope houses before. Like, I've gone in places where I had no business being. And you can't help those people. But what I learned is that you can stand in the light. And if you're loud about it, you're like, why be here? It's uncomfortable for me. I got a podcast that I'm real reticent to do. I got a bunch that I haven't put up, whatever. My thing is, though, is if you don't expose yourself, then you can't be very helpful. And so at a certain point, it's not about exposing yourself for likes or adoration, right? It's like, how can I be the most useful? And I think that you becoming that guy, man, thank you for your service, because they need you, you know? And what they gave me was a practice, a way to walk every day. They said, don't matter what you think, it don't matter what you're feeling, but you get smart feet, move your feet this way. And they gave me directions of what to do, and it helped me tremendously. And it gave me, it's like, you know, when we hear Karen Miller talk, and it's, what I love and appreciate the most about people like that are that it's decisive. It's so clear. It's this or that. And maybe it's both, and maybe that's okay too. Let's move on. Let's move into something that's going to go into a positive direction. And the other thing is, the last thing I'll say is that, I talked to a dude. We did a whole bunch of work together, really working a lot, and come to find out he's been on a speed run for 3 weeks, right? Hasn't had much sleep, and he's whatever. And then he went away. He got locked up, and years later he called me. And he goes, Tate, all that stuff that you talked to me, he says, I'm doing great. I got a family now. I got 2 kids, a wife. I've been clean for 3 years, blah, 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 blah. And he goes, I just need you to know, in case you get discouraged, that all those words, when I'm out slamming speed, are in my head still. And like, your words are what's in my head. And it's a tonifying, calming quality that brought me back into where I could get help again. And so my thing is that it's on God's time. It's on the universe's time, not on my time. I go and I do good work. Shit, man, that might not bear fruit tomorrow, but it doesn't mean that in some unseen way that it's not a positive good that happens. And he was kind enough to let me know that it was in his life. And I think that shit happens all the time. And so I just, you pay attention to the flowers in front of you, just like you're doing. I don't know if that helps or not, but.
Yeah, no, I mean, it does, because you hear a lot of the opposite in just other coaches and stuff. They're just like, fuck that guy.
Yeah. Imagine if you'd have been loved more by strangers just for nothing, what that would have left you with, and that's what you're doing, I mean, that's what a dude said. He says, your job is you love the unlovable and you give hope to the hopeless, I mean, we could have that in spades and all be better off.
Anyone else?
So, Tate, you talked a lot about the benefits of being vulnerable, right? And facing those challenges and going towards those challenges. But at the same time, right now, it seems kind of across the population, there's a mindset of what doesn't kill me makes me weaker, right? There are people who have kind of gone over the edge of chase adversity or whatever, and now they're almost like punishing themselves, right? Thinking that that's what they need. How do you kind of manage that fine line, your career prior to the movies for sure was a combative career, right? So you literally were facing, you get knocked out, that's as close as you can get to death, right?
Sure.
Without dying. So how do you manage that, and with those people that you impact or the people that you talk to, how do you help them manage that where they still seek challenge, still seek adversity, but are okay with not going to the extremes, if that makes sense?
Everybody's past their own, is what I think, and time is great. I don't know if you know, but Father Time, he's got a flawless record, and he's just got brutal ground and pounds. And if you don't get the lesson today, you'll get it tomorrow. It'll come again. And so if
I like that one. That's a good one.
If you're not balancing your shit, you'll see, and that's the way I go. I mean, I don't go because I had great ideas and I go down the wrong road every time, still, every time. And I go, oh shit, they said this was the wrong way, and I guess it seems like they're right. And then I go back the other way, right? And so, yeah, I just gotta, I gotta play it loose enough with myself to give myself a little leeway, and also to understand. Remember, there's this 12-year-old that came to my gym for a while, and he was a little prick. Horrible, awful to be around. And this 16-year-old, he goes, he's 12, Tate. 16-year-old's telling me that. He's 12. That's the way 12-year-olds act. I was like, oh, man. And I'd never given, I was so rigid in my thinking, I never gave anybody room to grow. You know, I wrecked a lot of years of a relationship with my father because I'm seeing him as the same son of a bitch that I knew when I was 12. And I'm going, look at all the change I've been through, Dad, and why don't you give me and I wouldn't let him show up different. And so, like, I always go back to, like, whenever people say, oh, a lot of people, like, fuck a lot of people. I'm the fish I gotta catch, you know? So it's how I course my life. It's how my choices are impacting others positively or negatively that I gotta reflect on and go, are you doing the greatest good or are you not, you know? Even though your intentions may be solid. And so I just always look at that. I mean, I'm great at looking at the ills of the world and pointing out flaws and all that stuff.
Well, aren't we all?
And it don't help me very much. Yeah. You know, it only helps me in reflection to, like, I don't want to be like that. You know, my whole thing with getting together with my father was, like, I'd heard guys that were like 50, 60 years old bitching about their dads, and I was like, that is an unmanly look. Like, if you're doing that, stop that shit. You know, and then somebody told me, he goes, you don't get your relationship with your father right, you won't have any relationship right in your life. And that was a horrid thing to hear for me. And I don't know that it's true or not, but it got me into action, you know? And it just always goes back to that. I'm the fish I gotta catch, you know? If worrying about how shitty your deadlift is that gonna make my deadlift better? You know, it's got nothing, just because you're winning and you're smashing at all these tournaments all around the world, does that mean that I cannot? You know, and all that stuff. And it's like whenever I see that scarcity mindset come up, man, I gotta crush it. But it happens sometimes multiple times in a day. It's just bringing my awareness up and reflecting back. And then also having a brother like John's, having that picket fence around you, not to cheer you up, to go, yeah, dude, you won, but fucking this could have happened, you know? I remember one of the worst times I ever had, I won this tournament. I smashed everybody. I didn't even train. I'd been sick well before it, and I didn't even cut weight. I went into and man, talk about not feeling like you earned it. I'd have rather lost. I never didn't cut weight again. I want to suffer in this life, and I want to earn it, God damn it. And if I'm not suffering, then my goal, that medal, it's not far enough away from me, you know? And I don't know what that is. I don't know if that's learned or if that's just in me or whatever, but, like, there's certain people that it's like that, and you can see that. And maybe it's, you know, looking at guys like John and going, I admire those character traits, and I want to adopt those. Because if this is the life, when I look in the mirror and I look at that face and I go, well, Tate, you might not be happy, but this is what we got to work with. Well, shit, man, I can adopt some traits of positive people I see around me. And so I've got a real keen eye to look at people and go, man, I like the way that guy walks, you know?
So then how do you give yourself the space to relax and be, you know, not rest on your laurels, right? But at some point you need to confirm to yourself that what you're doing is right and what you're doing is good, and you do at some point deserve it because of the work, but...
I think you're the only judge of that. I mean, if you're looking for external forces to validate what you think is good or not, you need to look for new fucking people and look in the mirror. I mean, at the end of the day, the only person, like when you're alone by yourself and it's you, so that's the only way. I'm not looking for validation. I mean, he's talking about, like, hey, this idea of service and helping people, but at the end of the day, he has to be okay with him. I mean, like, there's that I hate using that term, but, like, you know, I can think of sitting on airplanes or just being in spaces where you're around people, but you're kind of isolated and, like, you know, being that introspective. Did I do, you know, was I the guy standing at the beach in Normandy? Like, you know, was I a good person? Did I earn this? Did I do what I was put on this earth to do? And more importantly, am I okay with me? I mean, that's a really interesting thing. I've run into this for a long time. Like, there's a lot of self-destructive people that really aren't okay with themselves. They kind of like themselves sometimes, but for the most part, they're not okay with them. And I think what's interesting with Tate and through our conversations, there was this kind of, I call it the hero's journey, and those of you guys, you know, have read Beowulf or any of the heroic epics, there's always these trials and tribulations that you have to go through that teach you these things so that when you get to the end, you've come through and, you know, you have the battle scars to show for the fights that you've won and for the fights that you've lost, and you've helped, you know, evolve yourself into this person where now you can, you know, be vulnerable in here and you put aside ego. I mean, my dad told me egos kill more people than cancer, and it's true. You know, and then I ran 80 days of cancer, which is even kind of weirder. But the idea of, you know, did I earn this? Was I the right person? And I think the only person that can answer that is you, regardless of how many people you know, we stand next to, like the Matt Damon thing, tell me I earned it, was I a good man? I mean, she validates it, but he knows the truth. And I think like that's the thing that has really kind of always inspired me, and I always really love talking to Tate, is like, here's this guy that has gone through these different trials and tribulations, has gone through the road, has the scars, this. I mean, you know, just looking at like the tattoos that he has, I don't know if you guys get a chance to look at his tattoos, there's no motif for anything. So I have tattoos and like it's all kind of a theme. His stuff is all different sections of his life, and I bet you he can take you through every tattoo and be like, oh, this one was here and this, and it's almost a storyboard of his life. That stuff is interesting, and seeing that and realizing that at this point, are you okay with you? Do you like the direction you're going? Because if you don't, you'll make a U-turn. And I'm sure you make U-turns constantly, but the idea of like, I'm always following my North Star, I always know the direction I'm going. I tell my kids, you know, how do you get to Never Never Land? They always say, you know, second star on the right, on till morning. You know, from Peter Pan. I always tell them, like, you always got to look for Never Never Land. You got to remember how to get there. And so for me, it's my kids. You know, my wife and, you know, my family, but like, dude, like my little boy, like seeing him run in every day, and then seeing that here I have this, you know, these 3 great kids and this incredible wife, and I get to be the role model that my parents were for me, whether good or bad. And this is an interesting thing when you realize that your parents are people too. Yeah. Like I think as a little kid, you kind of put your parent on this pedestal, and then you become a parent yourself, and you're like, ooh, my parents were just people that were doing the best that they could. And then you kind of like, and that's what he was saying, like you got to forgive your parents. Like I believe anybody over age of 25 that still blames their parents for their fucking lot in life needs to grow up. Because at about 25, your brain is effectively hardened to the point where you've matured to where you look and realize that your parents are just people just trying to do the best they can. And then as a parent, realize that ain't fucking good enough. And I think about that all the time. Like the excuse of just, hey, I'm a parent, I'm a person, I'm doing the best I can. No, I need to hold myself to a higher standard because those kids are looking up to me. And if you want to make a big splash, throw a big rock. If you want to make a little ripple, throw a pebble. And I only got big rocks. I only want to make big splashes. So, cool. All right.
Any other questions?
Yep.
A quick two-parter. John mentioned a movie from 1994, greatest movie year of all time, Bert, Saving Private Ryan. So as an individual in the industry, an appreciation for filmmaking and storytelling that I'll probably never understand, what's your favorite movie of all time?
I mean, reflexively, The Godfather comes up in my head. I would also say Tombstone, even though True Grit's a way better Western, but it's kitschy enough for me to like it, I guess. And Doc Holliday is the best. That's the best representation of Doc Holliday that there ever was. Yeah.
I approve of that answer. Second question. I don't know if I've ever seen a movie of yours in which you've won a fight, lived.
Let's see.
To end it.
Oh, I'm
Is there
kind of
something
a
I'm missing?
hero in a thing coming up that I can't talk about at all. That is, it takes place in outer space.
Ooh.
But you're gonna love it.
All right. Sounds like a W. So, can you give us any insight on what it's like to go into an audition for like a guy you know is gonna die? Like get eaten by a dinosaur.
I don't know that they tipped. I was supposed to die in Jurassic World, and then I just ended up living. Just accidentally, they ran out of shooting time. It got to be daylight, late in the jungle, and they didn't have time. We'd practiced it and everything. I was supposed to get jacked by a raptor, but instead I got to kill a pterodactyl. But it was a GMO pterodactyl. I would have never killed a free-range one, you guys. It's nice because it keeps you in check a lot because you gotta, you go into those rooms first and you're like, all right, what are they looking for? And then you try to be what they're, and you look fugazi, you look inauthentic. And nothing reads inauthenticity like a camera. And so you go in and it's an exercise in failure. And they say you fail, that you go to 500 auditions to get one job or something. It's a crazy number, right? So you get told no all the time. And you learn to either be resilient or you quit. And, but then the thing is I just get proud to get asked to go in the audition. I'm like, I love doing this thing. And how cool is it that I get to now go and practice in front of somebody that matters? And that whole thing of doing it when it matters, Like a lot of these nerds will talk about the flow state and say, oh, you can get there with mushrooms or you can get there with whatever, man. I think if there's no consequence, your experience is muted to a certain degree, and you won't really ever know what that's like. But when you start to play with consequences, you dial, I mean, no PRs happen when you practice. Never. It always happens on game day. All the time. Records are broken on the podium. That's what happens, man. They don't happen in the training room. And so the closer I can get to that experience, I'm just fucking proud to be there, man. And then a guy told me, he says, Tate, they don't know what they're looking for either. So you just go and give them you know?
Do you think that like all of a sudden they read a movie script and they're like, bad guy number 1 dies? Ooh, call Tate?
They do.
And they're like, he's great bad guy. He takes a knife better than anybody.
Yeah. There's guys, John Bernthal just wants to kill me. And so he wants me to go on, I couldn't go on a Punisher last year, but he killed Keith instead, I think. One of my partners in the coffee company is Keith Jardine, and who also, we've had this long running together as training partners, and now as we get killed in movies sometimes together.
All right.
We have another question over here. Let's just keep going.
Yeah, like,
What's happening?
Does it work? Cool, works.
Can we hit mic 4, please?
So, question I had. I'm from a town called Huntington, West Virginia. Made the drive down. It was awesome. 22 hours in this guy's pickup truck. That was great.
Right.
It is, and after all that laughing, I'm sorry to have like such a serious question, but so Huntington is sort of the heart of the opioid crisis in Appalachia.
Yeah.
And I am someone that I grew up in college. I got real into alcohol. I sold coke for a few years, got me down a real dark path, and actually, not to sound cliche in this setting, but CrossFit football actually got me out of it when I found that program.
Right on.
power to the people.
Yeah, right. I remember the
baby.
first.
You know what? Not to cut you off, but it's amazing to have to like segment away from that, like what we did with CrossFit football, because all the cool people like found us that way. And so like I'm always amazed when people find Power Athlete Now, and I'm like, did you find us CrossFit football? And they were like, no. I'm like, how come? Like we've been doing this for a long time, but it was sad to have that piece cut off because it was one of the more fun, interesting, really good things, and it effectively allowed me to cut my teeth in the first iteration to be able to do it much better on this side. So thanks for finding us.
Of course, I still have the screenshot of the last day of CrossFit football programming on my phone. I keep it, and I actually had it. I had a hyperlink on my my desktop to CrossFit football, and I didn't click it because I was worried it would change to Johnny Wad. So it stayed the helmet, and then one day I accidentally clicked. I said "fuck," and it changed to Johnny Wad instead. I was like, "Damn it, that was right there." But no, so thank you for that. What I was gonna say was so I grew up sort of really poor, living above strip clubs and like shitty motels and shit with my mom and my sister. And I promise I'm not getting like teary-eyed. I'm super fucking nervous right now.
Don't worry, it's dark.
Yeah, it's dark. No one can see. But we, just with Huntington being in the state that it is, we've got a playground behind the gym. We find used needles on it. We find people ODing on it all the time, and it's a neighborhood too. So we've got this group of kids that come to the gym, and they try to come to the gym, and our owner's like, no, you're fucking punk kids, get out of here. And they're 6 and 7, right? And then you take them home, and their parents are hoarders, they're strung out on drugs, they've got 12 fucking dogs running around, there's shit everywhere, and you're like, man, I'm just trying to be a positive place for these kids to hang out. And we have an agreement, me and these kids do, that you can hang out at the garage door when people are working out, and after that, I don't care if you come in. You can come in and hang out, and I'll come back and talk to you and hang out, right? I'll go drag sleds and run sprints, and I'll let them drag a sled, and I'll let them run sprints with me. And me and the owner are consistently butting heads and arguing over the fact that I'm trying to be a positive influence on these kids, right? I'm trying to give them the thing that kind of I needed at that age and what CrossFit football gave me. And he's like, no, they're fucking punk kids. I don't want that shit around my gym. And he'll close the garage door in their face, right? And I'll go back and open it, right? And it's incredibly frustrating to just try to do the human thing of help somebody else and try to do the human thing of give back what you've learned and be the person that you wanted when you were younger and needed when you were in that state. And I was wondering, do you guys have, and that's going up a hog's ass for a ham sandwich, just to ask, do you guys have any kind of suggestions for, when you feel like you're doing the right thing, and I think just inherently you are doing the right thing, or at least the human thing, how do you overcome the frustration of getting constant pushback from people that are higher up the chain than you that are I don't want it around. I don't want it around. Don't do it anymore. And it's to be honest, I'm stubborn as fuck. So I stick to my guns, and I'm like, no, this is what I'm going to do, and you can fire me if it's a problem, and he doesn't. But you have to hear it and hear it and hear it. Do you guys have any advice for overcoming that kind of frustration?
It's his business, And he's right, because it's his business. And if you want to have a different business, do that. The other way that I would say circumvent that is that, like, I've tried to help these guys. I got one kid with me since he was 13, you know, and he's 24 now, and he's his first of his family to go to college. Like, the whole thing, man, he's dope. And he was one that I out of all those boys, that I fucked up the least, probably. And I ruined a couple guys, ruined them. Like, maybe that's harsh to say, like, that there's that much responsibility in it for me, but I wanted to give guys a life and an opportunity that I didn't have. And so I made the road easier for them, and that was the wrong course to take. The road should never be easy, and it needs to be earned. And so, and I don't know about your, you know, what I wish I had done, I can only look back in self-reflection, is I wish that I'd instilled a very strict and arduous set of disciplinary rules and behaviors that they needed. You need to dress this way, you need to show up and sweep this, you need to stack that, you need to, like, gave them discipline. I could have done that too. I gave them partial discipline and partial cheesecake, and that, I ruined them. And so I would just, you know, maybe think of that, have that in the back burner of your mind of going, a lot of times I feel like my intention is I'm doing the greatest good, but I'm looking too small to see that maybe that's not the case at all. And I've got to be open to that, you know? And I've got to listen to the sounding boards around me and go, maybe there's a better way than this, you know? Because, fuck, what do I know?
Yeah, I think it's you're always stuck in this position of, like, doing the right thing, and if you know what the right thing is, and you know, I grew up, my mom and dad were married for 50 plus years. I was the youngest of 3 brothers. My brothers are all very successful, and we all did really well. And what was interesting was when I went to the NFL, they were always surprised. Like, you're a, you know, middle-class white kid from, you know, the suburbs, and, you know, how are you able to go out and do this thing? And I remember Andy Reid asked my mom that, and my mom fucking read him the Riot Act, where she said, well, why shouldn't my son be successful? Why would he go out there and fucking lose? You think I raised a loser? And you guys have heard me tell the story that I got in a fight when I was pretty young with an older kid. We both got taken to the principal's office, and my mom walked in there and, you know, kind of hot, and went in there, yelled, you know, talked to the principal, came out, and she's like, how'd it go? I was like, oh, I beat him up. She's like, did you win or lose? I'm like, I won. She's like, that's good, because if you lose, you can't come home. Get in the car. And I remember that, like, anytime I went out to fight or anything, I was like, fuck, I gotta win. I can't, if I'm not, I'm not gonna be able to go home. So even in the NFL, I still, like, if I lost, it was fucking gonna be a bloodbath. But that's how I was raised. And that doesn't have anything to do with where you grew up or any of the other stuff. Like, that was instilled. Like, there was never failure was never an option. And I think for these kids, being able to mentor them and give them an opportunity, you know, I don't know what to say. I mean, it's really hard to instill compassion in people, and they either have it or they don't. And he might look at it and say, well, this is taken away from my business. My clients don't want these fucking little street rat kids here, so it's gonna fuck up our business, and we're gonna lose clients. I'm gonna have to shut the doors. And then the whole gym's gonna go to shit because you wanted to bring in these little assholes. And I'm sure that's what he said. And you're, like, thinking to yourself, and you're like, yeah, but why, you know, we have to do something. You know, the idea of, you know, those who can have the responsibility to. You know, like, this is a really interesting thing in our country right now with, like, you know, civil service. I don't know, you guys watched, you know, the funeral for George Bush for 41. You know, I've heard a statement, like, he's probably one of the last American presidents that we'll ever have that really understood service. And they were going through the trials in life, and, like, here's a guy from, you know, from New York who decides to go to Midland, Texas, and, you know, pilot, I mean, baseball player, I mean, just a really interesting dude. I mean, was the VP for you know, Ronald Reagan, director of the CIA, president. I mean, just unbelievable 94 years. And, you know, they were talking about, you know, where did the politicians and the people that were that we've entrusted to lead this country, where did the social responsibility go to make everything better, not just better themselves? And that's a bigger piece. I don't have an answer for you other than the fact of I wouldn't want to see your gym get shut down for whatever reason, because people are extremely fucking callous.
Yeah.
But I also don't believe in that, you can turn those kids away and not help them. So I would look for something else and some other way to do it, whether it's like, hey, is there something else we can do? Is there a way to negotiate something and being like, can we help these kids? Because here's the deal, if we don't help them, who's gonna help them? And opiate addiction and all that other stuff. I mean, the amount of players and guys that I know that the opiates have fucked up and have like stole their lives and like, I mean, just unbelievable, is scary to me. I'm fearful that people, I'm glad that they're going and putting some restrictions on that stuff, but the only problem is now it's become the rise of heroin. So now they can't get the opiates anymore, so then it's just like, let me get the worst stuff. And, like I said, my brother's a defense attorney and worked as a DA. You can ask Callie on this. I mean, the drugs and this addiction thing is tearing people apart. But the problem is we just look at it and say, oh, we have to cure the addiction. But you can listen to Tate and say, what are the drugs? What's the addiction doing? Like, what is it? It's filling a void. And the problem is that void is unfillable. It doesn't matter. And, my little girls are 7 years old. So when you said 6 or 7, I know exactly the individuals you're talking about. And that time in their life is such a vital point to have a positive role model and to feel like there's somebody that's there looking out for them or somebody who's there and their champion. And I don't know how you balance that, but I think you're on the right track. And I think at the end of the day, like I said, when you're all alone and you have to look in the mirror or you're with yourself, you have to feel comfortable that I did the right thing regardless of the outcome. So
I think you also got to think about there's insurance. If one of those kids gets hurt, you got to think about the worst case. One of those kids get hurt, one of those parents comes and sues your boss and takes his business, how you feel. Like that's your responsibility. And so in some way, there's thinking about that and then going, how do I turn these kids into an asset or one or two of them so that my boss sees them as an asset now, and also that at the end of the day, man, the people you remember that helped you, it's like a teacher or it's a coach or it's somebody like that, and you get to be that guy for them regardless of your boss, is a complete stranger that opened up this carnival shop of a gym for them to play in that loved them and they cared enough about them to say yes, But there's a lot to think about. You can't just help. Like I said, when I've helped wantonly, it has bad results sometimes,
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for being here.
are we good?
We got one more over
All right,
here.
One more?
One more.
Yeah.
So, John, you say, that mindset of failure is not an option is kind of what drove you to success. And I think a lot of high performers, young in life, probably had a similar mindset, but now we know failure is where we grow. So how do you, or Tate, you in a role where you guys are now, somebody who has been a high performer in a career, switched over and continued to be a high performer in another career, counsel those who hear the failure is not an option when they fail?
Well, I think you run into this idea of you never really grow through your successes. You really grow through your failures, and I know that's such a fucking cliche thing to say, but it is. I mean, literally, an hour ago, I'm sitting there talking with Rob Wolf about our failed food company, and what we could have done better. And here it's been a couple years, and the whole thing, and we're still reliving it and figuring out if we get another opportunity, and it's just I think the issue comes down to failure is going to happen, but the problem is that one failure isn't the end of your road. It's not I got this one match, it went out, fucking now I got nothing. No, you're going to fail at something, and as long as you continue to move, that failure has to teach you something, or then that failure becomes the finite piece of it. Oh, I failed at that, I can't go on and do anything else. Woe is me. No, that failure taught me a lot about what not to do in business, what not to do in a food company, what not to do with partners, and it really shaped me in a lot of ways to not remake those same mistakes. Like I said, I'll attribute some things. My dad never gave me fatherly advice. He would just say things off the cuff. But he made a good point to me once where he said, the difference between a smart man and a wise man. And I figured he was going to smart ass me because he usually did. He was a smart dude too. And he said, a smart man can learn from his mistakes. A wise man can learn from the mistakes of others. And he said, you want to be smart or wise? I was like, well, both? He's like, exactly. Learn from your mistakes and learn from the mistake of others. If you have to make every mistake, it's going to be a hard, painful life. And as I'm sitting here listening to Tate, being like, I have to make all these mistakes, I have to go the wrong way. And like, that's like the battle armor in this. I mean, I can listen to, you know, ask Tate a question and he could say, hey, I did this and this and this. And if he tells me his mistake, I don't need to be like, or like he puts his hand on the stove and is like, holy shit, that's really hot, I burned my hand. Yeah. I don't have to go over there and be like, really? I'll take his word for it. Even if he's fucking with me and it's not hot, I'm still not gonna touch it. Like how many times you guys go to a restaurant and they go, ooh, hot plate, and they put it down and people instantly touch it. Every time. You know what I do? Sounds good. I take your word for it. Right? So I want to be a wise man and a smart man. I tell my little girls this, like, and Rob and I were laughing about this because he's got 2 little girls about the same age. I tell my little girls that the day that you fall in love with the process of growth, like when you can go from, and like my daughters have a spelling test every Friday, so we work on these words. And they're so upset that they can't spell these words. And I'm like, well, why would you be upset about not spelling the words? You've never seen these words before. We haven't practiced them. And they get so emotional about this. And I'm like, you have to learn to love the process of not being able to spell the word. And then 10 minutes later, we can spell the word. And then you go and you get this thing. You guys are just focused on like getting the grade. I want you to be focused on learning the word. And then realize that all the words build on each other. And we go through this whole thing. And I'm just like, I want you to enjoy the process. If you can understand like the love of like, and I always, you guys will hear me say, like be a white belt, like be a beginner, you know, that journey to being able to spell those words. And they just look at me and they're like, shut up, old man. Like they couldn't care less, all right? They're 7 years old. And I'm gonna keep telling them. Like I literally repeat these things over and over and over again. I don't know if it's getting in, but it's not being from my lack of effort. And so, you know, that idea of failure, I think people are, it's pretty interesting. It took me a long time to come to this realization that I had this, I still do, I have a tremendous fear of failure. Like I'm not scared to fail, but I have a fear of failure. It's what wakes me up. I remember after every NFL game, I would call my brother and I'd be like, I'd be sitting on the bus, I'd be like, what's up, man? He's like, how'd it go? I'm like, oh, it went all right. And he'd be like, how'd you play? And he's like, I watched the game, looked pretty good. I'm like, I think I caught the guy on a bad day. He's like, it's pretty interesting. Every Sunday I call you, you happen to have caught the guy on a bad day. I'm like, I just think he had an off day and I got him. He's like, okay. He's like, as long as you can keep catching people on their off day for 10 years, you'll be fine. I'm like, yeah, sounds great. And that was kind of our running joke. And he's like, you know, like that idea of, you know, failure isn't necessarily something to be run from, and it's this terrible thing, but it teaches you things. It gets you up in the morning because I have people depending on me, and that person is myself. And then you end up with little kids and this, and you know, you're working on a spelling because you want them to be successful. But the other thing I'm scared about for my kids is I don't want to be in a situation where they don't fail. Like if they have to learn failure as teenagers or in their 20s or 30s for the first time they'd failed, I'm scared to death. Like I want them to like learn failure and learn how to fight and come out of the cellar and get knocked down and this. Like that's what I want. And I think what we do as parents, at least today, and I think why we're seeing this whole thing, and I always love where people are like, oh, kids have changed, they're different. That's bullshit. It's the parents that are fucking different. It is, 100%. Like my mom was like, if you're gonna go out there and fail, you're gonna go out there and fail, and I'm gonna make fun of you about it. And then you're gonna, you know, like that idea, now we're like, oh, like nobody can fail. I'm gonna wrap you in bubble wrap. Like you guys have seen me, like my kids run, they face plant. What do? I just keep walking. Get up, let's go. People are like, ah! Like, don't do that. Don't fucking do that. Don't do that around my kids. Just get up, you'll be fine. Don't worry, we'll keep going. And because like I want them to do that, they shouldn't be in bubble wrap. Like I want them to go outside. Part of the reason we moved to Texas is I want them to go run around outside. My kids go outside when we lived in Newport Beach, people call the police on me. I swear to God, your kid's outside and you're even in the door like cracked watching, people call the police, right? Like that's not society. Like I'm watching my kids, I'm not a bad parent. I live in Newport Beach, like cheapest home's $2 million. You think people are driving around my neighborhood to steal my kid 10 feet from me? I don't know. I just think this idea in our society is like we have to, like nobody should fail, everybody should be fine, let's all be fucking okay. But that's not the real world. And the problem is what happens when you do fail, you do stumble, you do faceplant. If I don't know how to do a push-up or get up or necessarily fight out of the cellar, I mean, you know, you can ask Tate on the fight thing. I mean, I fought when I was younger. I mean, dude, everything sounds great until you get punched really hard in the mouth and you go down and you're like seeing the world spinning and you're thinking to yourself, shit, I got to fight out of the cellar on this one. Like that's an awful feeling, but if you've done it before, it becomes that comfort level. You're being like, all right, now it's on. I've been here before. Opposed from like, I mean, I'm sure you've seen guys that were great jiu-jitsu guys, all of a sudden get slammed and it fucking shatters them and they're never the same person.
I would say as far as like going too far with characteristics that may be good, it's, you know, in different parts of my life, it's been different things, you know, and I, like being highly disciplined, like with your diet, say, like if you're gonna, you know, you need to meet a certain weight or something at a certain date, and that's, you can drive by every McDonald's and hate everybody that you see in line at the drive-thru and just think that they have a whole story about them. And it doesn't help you at all, you know? And so, like, as I live in reflection of others, in regards to how I'm living, it's not super purposeful for me. It can be hard for me to take the same kind of austere training conditions that I have and then to make my household follow those is maybe not quite in line and conducive to the growth of everybody in the house, right? And now I'm a tyrant. My cousin had these two guys stand up at her wedding that were friends of her husband, who is a SEAL team member. And these guys, the three of them all came back from gunfights. Two of them were okay. My cousin shot up pretty bad, and he's still taking care of that. But one of these guys in a training exercise in a pool drowned and died. And I thought, how's that happen? You're supervised, and there's all these people here. And I started thinking about what that is. And I think about, you know, comfort on one side of things, right? Some of the things that we've been talking about. Because it baffled me until it dawned on me that the other side of comfort is death, right? And so I push away my comfort, and I try to adhere to discomfort. But especially if I'm doing something underwater and we're here and we're competing kind of in a way, right? I'm not gonna quit before you. Why do I go on to, you know, to try? Is because I don't wanna let John down or whoever's sitting next to me. If I'm alone in a room, I'll quit. But if I've got other people that are on my back, man, we're going. And so I think that their toughness, which you would say is an attribute anywhere, can blur the line into discomfort, and then they can cross right into death. And that can happen too. And it goes back into that balancing, I think, you know, like the most extreme examples of that, yeah, people die. I mean, these kids, people die. That's part of the deal too, man. And it's been really ringing true lately that, you know, that idea of decisiveness and decisive action being clear. Clear is kind, unclear is unkind, you know, and to be very rigid with myself about being an adherent to the truth and letting that have clarity and transparency with those around me so that there's not any muddy water is super, super important in that way, because I need you to balance off of what I'm doing or saying and going, hey dude, you're taking it a little too far. You know, I've got to be in that position. And again, it's like I don't live in a cipher. I don't live in a bubble. I got to have a crew around me that makes sure that I don't die, right? Or that I'm not, you know, treating people poorly or whatever the metric is that you want to put to it. And I think it probably comes up all the time. I mean, if we thought about it more, we could probably find endless examples. But I think that thing is it's going down the wrong path and reflecting and going back. And as far as like living in failure or whatever like that, you know, I really try not to, you know, a dude told me a long time ago, he goes, you're not in the results business, Tate, you're in the action business. You do the good work, you leave the results up to the universe. And so that thing about winning or losing or whatever, I mean, we see it in fights or in whatever a lot. Shit comes down to people's opinion. This guy did this or that. Maybe you get people disagreeing on that. Does it matter? I mean, maybe it does in that microcosm of like that career, but in that broad expanse of things, God damn it, isn't it better to go out there and go, fuck man, I really gave it my all. I tried, I put all my training into process, and how lucky am I that I got to express it in this form, in this venue that was made exactly for this. And I'd really rather be exultant in the try than some shallow victory or what seemed like a wonderful win. You know, that stuff matters less and less to me, because I think it's easy to stop trying and then there's no win ever. And so it's real imperative that I just stay in the try.
I think we're good on that one.
We good?
Anyone else?
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tate. Thanks, John.
Hey,
Give
man.
him a round of
Thank
applause,
you.
guys.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate you.